Let's talk about something most people feel before they ever have proof. That gut instinct that something is off. He's pulling away, acting strange, being extra nice, and somehow you're the one left confused. Now, not every man who becomes distant is cheating, but every cheating man becomes distant in a very specific, very strategic way. And if you don't know what to look for, it's easy to gaslight yourself into silence. Today, I want to pull back the curtain on the sneaky patterns many unfaithful men fall into, not because you're paranoid, but because you deserve clarity. This isn't about creating fear. It's about giving you tools to spot dishonesty early, trust your instincts, and protect your self-worth before someone else chips away at it. So let's dive into the subtle, yet powerful, moves that cheating men make and how you can see them clearly before they leave emotional damage behind. It starts slowly, so slowly that you almost miss it. In the beginning, he's fully present. The texts come in often. He remembers the little things. He's curious about your day, your thoughts, your feelings. You feel seen, you feel wanted, and you're not imagining it. He was attentive. He was interested. But somewhere along the way, the intensity dips. You go from constant connection to an odd silence. The good morning texts stop. The little calls on his lunch break vanish. Plans that were once exciting and intentional become vague or postponed. At first you might think, maybe he's just stressed. Work's been crazy. Everyone has off weeks. And that's fair. Life does happen. But what's important here is not just that his attention changed, it's how it changed. Because men who are cheating don't just disappear. They shift their behavior in a way that feels subtle but disorienting. You can't quite put your finger on it. There's no big fight, no harsh words, but something's different. The warmth is still technically there, but it's like he's operating on autopilot. You're being strung along by just enough affection to keep you from questioning him too directly, but not enough presence to feel truly secure in the relationship. This is where it becomes dangerous, because when your gut speaks up and says something's off, you start to doubt yourself. You replay the conversations. He said he's just busy. He still said he loves me last night. You rationalize because you want to believe the best. But what you're actually experiencing is the first layer of emotional manipulation. A cheating man often doesn't want to get caught. So instead he creates just enough emotional maintenance to keep you hooked while his attention is somewhere else. And this tactic is deliberate. It's a way of easing his own guilt. He doesn't want to feel like he's abandoning you, so he stays just involved enough to convince himself he's still being a decent partner. But decent partners don't slowly ghost their way out of commitment while lining up emotional or physical attention elsewhere. They don't become too busy overnight, and they definitely don't watch you grow anxious and confused without stepping in to bring clarity. What makes this pattern especially insidious is that it causes you to internalize the shift as your problem. You begin to wonder if you're being too needy, too sensitive. You might even start working harder to reconnect, initiating more, softening your boundaries, blaming yourself for what feels like a growing gap. But that's exactly what this behavior relies on, your belief that you're the one who's changing, not him. Cheating men are rarely sloppy at first. The move isn't dramatic, it's gradual, strategic, and masked as stress, distraction, or emotional overwhelm. But what's actually happening is that he's rerouting his energy somewhere else. And he doesn't want you to notice until he's figured out whether he's truly done with you or just wants the thrill of something new while keeping your loyalty in the background. The antidote here is not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. When someone who once pursued you now passively manages the relationship and your connection feels like it's running on fumes, that's not always just life getting in the way. Sometimes it's a warning sign that they're pulling away with intent, not because they're too busy to love you, but because they're too guilty to tell you they're giving love to someone else. After a period of distance or strange behavior, he suddenly becomes the man you fell for again. He's affectionate, thoughtful. Maybe he brings home flowers, plans a weekend getaway, or texts you something unexpectedly sweet in the middle of the day. It catches you off guard. In a good way, you start to breathe again, thinking, maybe I was just overthinking. The doubts fade, the warmth returns, but there's something that doesn't quite sit right. The shift is too abrupt, too polished, too perfectly timed to the moments when you started asking questions or pulling back emotionally. And that's the whole point. This is one of the most subtle but emotionally manipulative tactics a cheating man uses, the overcompensation move. When he feels guilty or senses that you're growing suspicious, he tries to override your intuition with a blast of affection. Not because it's genuine connection, but because it's damage control. He's not investing in the relationship, he's managing your perception of him. And in that moment, it feels like love, because it's designed to. Human beings are wired to respond to reassurance. When someone has been emotionally absent and suddenly returns with extra tenderness, it gives us a dopamine hit. It feels like relief, like things are finally returning to normal. But what it really does is create a cycle of emotional confusion. One day you're wondering if he's pulling away, and the next, he's holding your hand like you're the only person in the world. That whiplash is not an accident. It's a way to reset your suspicion and reestablish trust without ever addressing what caused the distance in the first place. This tactic is especially powerful when you want to believe in the relationship. And let's be honest, most people do. If you've invested your time, your heart, and your hope into someone, the last thing you want is for it to be unraveling behind your back. So when he becomes unusually sweet or generous after a rough patch, it's tempting to see that as proof that he still cares. You might even tell yourself maybe he realized how distant he was and is trying to make it right. And maybe sometimes that's true. But if this wave of affection feels like it's appearing out of nowhere, especially right after you've noticed red flags, there's a reason to be cautious. The most confusing part of this pattern is that the behavior isn't necessarily fake. He may genuinely feel guilt. He may truly enjoy making you smile, but the intent behind the affection is what matters. Is he being loving to reconnect and repair, or is he being loving to distract you from asking deeper questions? If he's not showing any interest in fixing what caused the disconnect, if he's not being open, communicative, and consistent, then the sweet gestures are more about silencing your instincts than nurturing your bond. Overcompensation is not sustainable. Eventually, the guilt wears off, or the new interest he's chasing takes priority again, and the cycle resets. He disappears emotionally. You start to feel anxious, and then, boom, he reappears with just enough affection to pull you back in. It's emotional bait, and it keeps you stuck in a relationship that feels just good enough to stay, but never stable enough to fully trust. Recognizing this pattern doesn't mean you have to accuse him of cheating. It simply means you stop letting temporary affection erase consistent discomfort. A relationship built on love doesn't make you second-guess your worth one day and overcompensate with romance the next. Real love is steady. Cheating men often know that. So when their actions don't reflect integrity, they disguise it with intensity. And if you're not paying attention to the pattern, you'll confuse guilt with love and end up mistaking the cover-up for commitment. You finally say something. You bring up what's been bothering you. Maybe it's the sudden distance, the way he guards his phone now, or how his stories don't quite add up. You don't accuse him, you just express how you feel, hoping to get reassurance or at least a real conversation. But instead of listening, he flips it. "Why are you being so paranoid?" he says, or "You always do this, you overthink everything." In a matter of seconds, the focus shifts away from his behavior to your reaction. And now you're not just confused, you're questioning yourself. This is one of the most manipulative plays a cheating man can make. It's not yelling, it's not denial, it's something much more subtle and more dangerous. It's gaslighting. And it's incredibly effective because it strikes at the root of your confidence. Instead of answering your concerns, he reframes your intuition as irrational. You go from asking a reasonable question to defending your right to even ask it. It's a tactic that doesn't just protect his secret, it destabilizes your ability to trust your own mind. In the early stages, this can feel like a misunderstanding. Maybe he says, "You're making something out of nothing," or "You're reading into things too much." And part of you wants to believe that. After all, if he's calm and you're upset, you start to feel like the dramatic one. But that's exactly how it works. A cheating man doesn't want to deal with the consequences of his choices. So instead of being transparent, he makes you question the validity of your own observations. That way, he never has to deny anything directly. He just makes you doubt your ability to see clearly. What makes this tactic especially damaging is that it's often wrapped in a tone of concern. He might say, "You know I love you, but this isn't healthy." Or, "It's hard to talk to you when you always jump to conclusions." So now your fear isn't just that something is going on, it's that you're becoming the problem in the relationship. You feel guilty for bringing it up. You might even apologize. And once that happens, the cycle is complete. Your reasonable discomfort has been turned into emotional self-blame. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to separate your instincts from your insecurity. Every time you feel something is off, you hear his voice in your head. You're just being paranoid. So you push down your concerns. You tell yourself to relax. You work harder to seem chill, to not nag, to not question. And that silence becomes a shield he hides. But the truth is, healthy partners don't make you feel crazy for expressing discomfort. They don't shut down your concerns with blame or sarcasm. They lean in. They ask questions. They help you understand, even if they don't agree with everything you feel. When someone's first instinct is to invalidate you, that's not love, it's control. Cheating isn't always about sex. Sometimes it's about lying, hiding, and avoiding accountability while still wanting the benefits of your love and trust. And one of the easiest ways to keep that balance going is to manipulate how you see the truth. If he can convince you that your gut reaction is irrational, he doesn't need to lie because you've already silenced yourself. No one wants to believe they're being deceived, but if your concerns are met with defensiveness, if your intuition is constantly dismissed, if you leave every conversation feeling less certain than when you started, those aren't signs of love, they're signs of someone trying to protect something that can't survive your clarity. And when someone's goal is to confuse you instead of connect with you, it's not because you're being paranoid, it's because you're getting close to the truth. It doesn't start with a lie, it starts with a shrug. A vague answer, a small detail left out. You ask a question like, "What did you do last night?" And he gives you a broad answer, "Just hung out with some friends." No names, no context. You try to dig a little deeper, not because you're accusing, but because you're curious. And suddenly, the mood shifts. He acts like you're interrogating him. He gets defensive, maybe even a little irritated. And you start to wonder if you're being too much. This is the power of vagueness. It's not about what's being said, it's about what's not being said. Cheating men often don't lie outright at first. Instead, they start to operate in the gray area. They become intentionally unclear. Their words are designed to be just believable enough to avoid further questioning, but not specific enough to be pinned down. If you ever try to revisit the story later, you'll notice the details change or suddenly disappear altogether. That shift is not accidental, it's strategic. When someone is doing something they shouldn't, clarity becomes a threat. Being specific means being accountable. If he tells you exactly who he was with and where he was, you have a reference point. You have something you could verify, something you could notice inconsistencies in. So instead, he keeps things blurry. He gives you enough to stop the conversation, but not enough to truly reassure you. It's not about forgetting, it's about creating distance between you and the truth without saying anything obviously wrong. And this pattern extends beyond his words. You start to notice he's more protective of his phone. Maybe he starts taking calls in another room, or he angles his screen away from you when a message comes in. When you ask about someone new you've noticed, maybe a coworker or friend he suddenly talks about more often, he acts like you're being ridiculous for even noticing. The key here is that everything starts to feel just a little harder to follow. His life used to be open to you, but now, piece by piece, it's like you're locked out. The confusion this creates is exhausting. You find yourself replaying conversations, looking for clues. You hesitate to ask questions because you don't want to seem paranoid, and slowly your own sense of what's normal begins to shift. You start accepting vague answers as good enough. You stop asking things you used to ask freely. You tell yourself to trust him, but trust isn't just about silence, it's about transparency. And the truth is, he's no longer letting you into the full picture. This is exactly where someone who's hiding something wants you. Unsure, self-silencing, questioning your own instincts. Because when you're confused, you're less likely to confront. Vagueness is not just about avoiding lies, it's about avoiding accountability. A man who cheats doesn't want the mess of a confrontation. He doesn't want the emotional labor of dealing with the hurt he's causing. So he keeps you off balance instead. He makes you feel like it's your own need for clarity that's the problem, not his growing secrecy. In a healthy relationship, transparency doesn't feel like a burden. You're not afraid to ask questions, and you don't have to work hard to get honest answers. If someone starts operating behind a fog, constantly just out of reach, rarely giving full answers, and always seeming just a little too private, it's not because they're naturally vague, it's because they're hiding behind that vagueness. And when you can't quite see the truth clearly anymore, it's often because someone is doing just enough to make sure you never do. When someone has something to hide, they don't always keep everything a secret. In fact, one of the most manipulative things a cheating man can do is tell you just enough of the truth to keep you from digging deeper. He'll admit to something small, a message from an ex, a flirtatious conversation with a coworker, a night out he didn't initially mention, but he'll frame it as harmless. He'll say, "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact," or "I didn't think it was a big deal." And because he's technically being honest about something, you begin to doubt whether there's anything more. This tactic works because it mimics transparency. He seems like he's coming clean, like he's trying to build trust. He might even look genuinely uncomfortable as he confesses this minor misstep, which makes you feel like he's being vulnerable. You want to believe him. After all, if someone is hiding something serious, why would they volunteer anything at all? But that's exactly the point. He gives you just enough of the truth to satisfy your suspicions while still protecting the bigger lie underneath. Now, what's important to understand is that this is not the same as real honesty. Real honesty means openness. It means answering your questions with clarity, showing a willingness to rebuild trust with full transparency. But this partial truth strategy is different. It's calculated. It's designed to disarm you. By giving you a glimpse of the truth, he controls the narrative. You don't ask more questions because you think you already have the whole story. You feel like confronting him again would be unfair. He already told the truth, right? In reality, this approach is one of the most effective ways to deceive without technically lying. It allows him to maintain his image as someone who owns up to things while still engaging in behavior that violates your trust. And because you're focused on the part he did admit, your energy gets directed away from the deeper betrayal that's still being hidden. Over time, this tactic makes you question your own instincts. You begin to feel guilty for not accepting the explanation he gave. You start to suppress that inner voice that still feels like something is off. But here's the thing, your intuition isn't reacting to the surface confession, it's responding to what's missing. That uneasy feeling doesn't go away, because even though you have a small piece of the puzzle, you still don't have the full picture. And deep down, you know it. This kind of manipulation also conditions you to accept less and less. The first time, it's a casual message from an old flame. The next time, it's a lunch he forgot to tell you about. And each time, the behavior escalates just a little. But he always has a justification ready. If you challenge him, he brings up the fact that he's been honest with you. He uses your desire for trust against you, making you feel like pushing for more clarity would mean you're being controlling or ungrateful. Eventually, you're in a relationship where he gets to define what's acceptable, what counts as cheating, and what qualifies as telling the truth. And if you're not careful, you'll end up believing that emotional dishonesty is something you're just supposed to accept, as long as he throws you a few crumbs of truth along the way. But love doesn't operate in half-truths. Trust isn't built on technical honesty. If someone is only telling you what they think you can handle or what they believe will keep you quiet, it's not respect, it's control. And no matter how small the thing he admits to seems, if it's being used to distract from something deeper, it's not a confession, it's a cover. At some point in the relationship, you set a boundary. Maybe it was asking for more communication. Maybe it was wanting transparency around certain people in his life. Maybe it was just expressing discomfort when something felt off. Whatever it was, it came from a place of self-respect. A desire to build a relationship grounded in honesty, security, and mutual care. But instead of hearing you out, he turned your boundary into a character flaw. You're being too intense. You're so insecure. Why do you always have to make things so serious? Suddenly, the conversation isn't about the boundary anymore. It's about what's supposedly wrong with you for even having it. is a classic defense mechanism used by men who cheat or are emotionally dishonest. Rather than addressing the behavior that's making you uncomfortable, they shift the focus onto your emotional response. It's not that he was texting someone inappropriately, it's that you're too sensitive. It's not that he disappeared for hours without explanation, it's that you don't trust him. And if you're not aware of what's happening, you start internalizing that narrative. You begin to question whether your standards are too high. You worry that you're being difficult, and in doing so, you soften your stance, not because you've changed your mind, but because he's made you feel like having needs is a problem. This kind of manipulation is incredibly subtle but deeply corrosive. It doesn't happen in one conversation, it's a pattern. Over time, he chips away at your confidence. Each time you raise a valid concern, he reframes it as emotional instability. He positions himself as the calm, rational one, while you become the emotional partner who's always finding problems, and the more you hear it, the more you start to believe it. You begin apologizing for things that aren't wrong. You stop asking questions you have every right to ask. You begin walking on eggshells, not because the relationship is healthy, but because he made you feel like you're the one who's unhealthy. What makes this tactic especially effective is that it often comes disguised as emotional intelligence. He might say things like, "You need to learn to let things go," or "We won't last if you keep bringing this up." On the surface, it sounds like he wants peace, but what he really wants is silence. He wants you to stop holding him accountable, because deep down, he knows your concerns have merit. He knows your intuition is picking up on something real. So instead of being honest, he convinces you that the issue isn't what he's doing, it's that you're not chill enough to handle it. This is how you lose your voice in a relationship. You become so afraid of being too much that you start to become less vocal, less expressive, less connected to your own needs. And he benefits from that silence. He gets to keep his behavior unchecked while you carry the emotional weight of constantly second-guessing yourself. But your boundaries are not the problem. Your standards are not flaws. The desire for clarity, consistency, and respect in a relationship isn't too much. It's basic emotional health. And any man who makes you feel guilty for asking for that is doing it to protect something, either his behavior, his ego, or both. The truth is, when someone is hiding something or behaving in a way that would not withstand real accountability, they have to make you feel like the problem. Because if you ever stop believing that narrative, you might finally start asking the questions he's worked so hard to avoid. And that's when his illusion of control starts to fall apart. So if you've ever found yourself feeling confused, anxious, or like you're suddenly the problem in a relationship that used to feel safe, pay attention. These sneaky moves aren't random, they're patterns. They're the quiet tools people use when they want to keep your loyalty while avoiding your questions. And no matter how subtle the behavior, the impact is always the same. You start doubting yourself instead of the person giving you reasons to. But here's the truth. Your instincts are not a weakness, they are your protection. If something feels off, it usually is. And if someone truly loves you, they will want to make that feeling go away through honesty, not manipulation. You don't have to tolerate emotional confusion, half-truths, or gaslighting just to keep the peace. You don't have to shrink your standards to keep someone who would rather deceive you than risk losing their convenience. You deserve a relationship where your boundaries are respected, your concerns are met with care, not defensiveness, and your peace is never dependent on someone else's lies. The moment you stop minimizing your truth to make someone else comfortable is the moment you take your power back. Don't wait for someone else to decide you're worth honesty. Decide it for yourself and walk like it.